So we're starting a new series. Second Peter, I really enjoyed studying through that. I really enjoyed the whole process of Second Peter. Romans is a whole different animal. I mean, it's a whole different flavor. Everything about Romans is going to be different than what we have just talked about it the last few weeks, the last 10 weeks. And to be honest, I don't even know really where this is going. I mean, I know what Romans does, and I know what I know where it's going scripturally, but I'm not going to rush through this, right? I'm not going to just kind of take some key events or those 8 favorite verses in Romans or anything like that. We're not going to try to condense anything. I just want to take it section by section and work through this and see what Romans has to say, because there's so much in here. So I don't know how long it's going to take when I say I don't know where this is going. So we're going to do this for a while. I have like 5 weeks planned, but it's going to be a lot longer than that because that's just like a little bit of it, and I'll just kind of go 5 weeks at a time planning ahead. And if at some point I look and your eyes are glazed over and I'm thinking, okay, we need to do something different, well, maybe we'll take a break from it and then we'll come back. I don't know. I just don't know that way what we're going to do. But I just want us to digest everything that Romans has for us. We're just going to dig into this thing. Romans is rich in foundational doctrines of our faith. It's written by a Jewish man to Gentile people. So it's written to us, right? It's written in a way that we can understand it. We can gain concepts about who God's is. And what makes this letter different than the other New Testament letters is often letters were written because there was an issue going on in the church, and maybe Paul is saying, hey, you got this issue. Let me straighten this out for you. Let me help you fix this. You've got some bad doctrine. Let me correct that. There's all kinds of things. That's not what Romans is. Romans isn't fixing any problems in the church. It is broadening and deepening our understanding of God. He goes, I just want you to know who God is. I want you to have a concept of who it is we worship and who it is we're centering our lives around. So if you stick with this study the whole way through, you will get to know and understand your faith, and you will get to know and understand your God in better ways than you ever have. It will literally change you if you allow God to speak to you through His Word in these next several weeks. So let's get this party started. Romans chapter 1, verse 1. The first 7 verses is the first little section. We'll just make it through like 3 little sections today. Romans 1:1. Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called as an apostle and set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, concerning his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who was a descendant of David according to the flesh, and was appointed to be the powerful Son of God according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection of the dead. Through him we have received grace and apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among all the Gentiles, including you who are also called by Jesus Christ. To all who are in Rome, loved by God, called as saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, Paul's a little more eloquent in starting letters than I am. I'm like, dear mom. Yeah, and go on. He gets into some stuff here. He's really laying the foundation of what is going to come up. He identifies himself in this opening as a servant of Jesus Christ. Right? I'm a servant, he says. And you're like, okay, great. He's like a waiter. No, this is a deeper word than that. The word translated servant is the Greek word doulos, which means servant or slave, means bond servant or slave. And as we've talked about in the past, just to remind you, a slave in their time is different than like American history, slavery. A slave in their time is maybe someone borrowed too much money and they owe a whole bunch of debt and they don't have the ability to pay it off. Well, that person goes to work for the lender, and now he becomes a slave of theirs. Now, under the Jewish system, you can only be a slave for 6 years. On the 7th year, you're let free. So there was a limit to what you could go to work for, right? There was also, though, a little contingency. What if you're a slave and you're working for someone and you're looking at your life and you're saying, you know what? I love my master. I love working for him. I love his family. I love what I do. Matter of fact, he's taking better care of me as a slave than I can take care of myself. I don't own land. I don't have cows. I don't have, whatever, all this stuff. I can't make it on my own. I really need this. A slave could go to the master and say, I want to spend the rest of my life working for you. I will be your slave forever. And if the master says, you know what? I also enjoy this relationship. You work hard, I pay you well, I treat you well, we treat each other well. This benefits both of us. Yes, I will accept that. They would take that slave to the city gate and put his ear up against a post, and they would pierce his ear. And that would be a sign going forward that I have given my entire life to ownership. I'm a slave of this owner. And what Paul is doing here is he is giving the rest of his life to Jesus Christ. He's starting off the letter, immediately telling the church, hey, I want you to know who's writing this letter. Apostle Paul, he hadn't been there before. He didn't know them. They didn't know him necessarily, other than from reputation. And he's basically saying, I want you to know I have dedicated my life, everything, to Jesus Christ. He is my master. I am his slave. I'm his bond servant. He directs my paths, everything I do, all my purposes, all my direction. He owns my career. He owns all of my possessions, everything. He owns my soul. My whole entire life belongs to him. It's his and his alone, not mine. I put myself away. I literally own nothing anymore. Now, that's a pretty powerful way to start a letter. That he's laying the groundwork here. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not saying, I'm this great consultant. I go around plant churches. You're going to want to hear what I have to say because I'm really smart. And that's not what he's saying here. He's not trying to sell his vision for the church. He's not trying to gain the command and the respect. You must listen to me. I'm really smart. He is humbly stating his position in life. I am a slave of Jesus Christ. I have willingly given my life, everything of it, to Jesus Christ. This letter is not about Paul. It's not about me. It's not about my antics and all the things I've done in my history. His ministry was not his personal business, nor did he run it like a business. It was not his way to fund his lavish lifestyle. He did not have a lavish lifestyle. Everything in his life was 100% about Jesus. I want you to know I have no agenda here. We're serving Jesus. I'm going to tell you how to serve Jesus. That's the opening of Romans here. He also mentions in verse 1 that he was set apart for the gospel of God. Now, what's the gospel? Good news, right? The gospel is the good news. This world is filled with all kinds of bad news. It was then, too. It is today. It was then, too. This letter is going to be God's good news. I want you to know the good stuff. I want you to know what God has done. There's going to be some tough spots. There'll be some rough situations where he says, oh, by the way, here's what's going on. Thank God for God's grace. Thanks God for the gospel. Thank God for the gospel, right? I mean, so he might take this to some places where we have to really contemplate ourselves, but he always comes back with the good news saying, God's got an answer for that. It's going to be okay. In verse 6, he reminds us that no matter where we have been, no matter what we have done in the past, as Christians, we have received the grace of God. And that grace, it drives us to obedience, and he calls the church people who are loved by God. So know that if you're a Christian here, you are loved by God. Now, you know that because you've accepted that, but sometimes it's good to be reminded, especially after 2 Peter, which had a lot of heavy stuff in it. He's telling us in Romans, God loves you. Don't forget that. He loves you, and he declares you saint. So if we were doing name tags, we'd have to redo them all and do saint, everybody, because that's who you are. Sometimes we think, oh, that's a mysterious, some person way up there. It's like, no, you're a saint. You are, under definition, a saint of God. Paul is reminding them of that as well. Now, this is not a church that Paul started, so he does not personally know most of the people. He might know a handful that he had rubbed shoulders with at some point, and they ended up in Rome and everything. So he doesn't know a lot about the church. He doesn't know the history as far as being there personally. But look at this affection that he has toward the church in this next little section, starting at verse 8. He says, well, first, now that I've greeted you and you know who I am, I want you to know, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because the news of your faith is being reported all around the world. So everywhere I go, people are talking about Rome, the church in Rome. You guys, this is awesome. I want to know you. I thank God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because the news of your faith is being reported everywhere. God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in telling the good news about his son, that I constantly mention you, always asking in my prayers that if someone is in God's will, that I may now at last, if it isn't somehow in God's will, I may succeed in coming to you at last. For I want very much to see you, so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to strengthen you. That is, to be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I think that'd be benefit both of us if we get together. Now, I don't want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I have often planned to come to you, but was prevented until now, in order that I might have a fruitful ministry among you, just as I have among the rest of the Gentiles. I am obligated both to Greeks and barbarians, both to the wise and the foolish. So I'm eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome. Okay, 3 quick things about this little section here. Number 1, Paul prays for and about the church. He's thanking God for the church in verse 8. If you're familiar with the writings of Paul, this isn't the first time he says that. He says that to other churches too. I always pray for you. I constantly remember you in my prayers. He mentioned that to Ephesians. I think it's in Colossians. I mean, several churches he says that to, which tells me Paul is not a territorial guy. You know, he's not like, hey, I'm in Philippi now, and that's really all I care about, so I only pray for the Philippi church. He goes, no, I'm always praying for you guys in Rome. I just want you to know that. I'm praying for you all the time. He has a much wider kingdom perspective. And I have to confess that I could learn a few things from Paul here, because I tend to live in a very small, self-centered world. I tend to focus more on this church than other churches. I may pray once in a while for other churches if something comes to mind, but I don't pray regularly for other churches. I pray once in a while for the churches I know, like in Zimbabwe, but I don't pray all the time for them. Something might come to mind, or but it's not like it's I can't say I'm always praying for you guys to other churches. I'm a little self-centered there. I'm a little small in my vision, I think. I pray more about my needs than the needs of other people who I don't know. There's probably some needs in churches in Connecticut today. I don't know. They're going to watch the championship game, and I don't know, just come to my mind. Well, I haven't once thought about them. We don't pray for them. I spend way more time thanking God for my blessings than how He has blessed others. I hear about great things happening in other churches, and sometimes my first thought is almost a twinge of jealousy. Oh, man, I want that. I think, how awful is that? Paul heard good things happening in Rome and says, man, this is so exciting. Well, look what God's doing. He has a wider vision of the kingdom. I think I can learn a few things from Paul. My whole point there. Number 2, Paul talks up the church there. He's not running around talking about him. It's not about his accomplishments. He's not. Let's talk about Paul for a while. Obviously, that comes up once in a while. But he's talking about the great things happening in Rome. And I kind of get this more so than the prayer one. We know what's going on in Africa. We go there every year. We do stuff there. We plant a church there. We do teachings and revivals. I love going around and talking about that. I love telling people things that they'd have no way of knowing about the church in Che, how it planted another church, and all. And it's just cool to talk about that, the baptisms and the teachings and just all the things going on over there. It's really, really cool, the excitement, the zeal that people have. I've been grown each time I go to get a deeper appreciation for their women's ministry, that are there, the glue that holds it together. I didn't recognize that in the beginning. It's a very patriarchal system, but man, those women are core there. And just observing that, I like talking about them. I love sharing the news of what's going on in Pathway, in Zimbabwe, but I also love talking about the news of what's happening in Pathway. Sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it. It just kind of flows out of your mouth. This is what's going on here. This is what we're doing there. Half of my social media is usually church stuff. I try to throw in like a dog picture once in a while, just like this, so I'm not always only talking about, what's going on in the church. I started using the little neighbors app thing recently. Just wanted to see what happened with it, and I will throw out like pictures of our homeless thing each couple weeks, and it just goes crazy. People start talking, and from that, people in the community are like, well, we want to help, so that's why we have an ugly box. I need to get something better than an ugly cardboard box out there, but we have a box, and people come all the time and are dropping supplies off there. I don't even know who they are half the time. Sometimes they will message me and say, hey, I'm coming. I was, okay, there's a box, And sometime this week, one of the days, someone messaged me, a family I had connected with a few months ago when I first started posting it. And they say, hey, we have more things. Would you like it? It's food and clothing and all these things. I said, well, absolutely. So we made an appointment, 1 o'clock, and on went to some house in Ankeny, and I picked up their things. That was really cool. And I got done, and I thought, man, even when I'm there, it just kind of comes out, talking about the stuff we're doing, the people we're meeting, and some of the names of the people, and what we're doing, and some of the food we're serving, and the way they love those, guy with no shoes who gets a pair of shoes, who's walking around in the snow, and it's like, now he has something covering his shoes, his feet, and this thing comes out, they're like, wow, it's so great what you're doing, and I'm thinking, well, I mean, it's just what God has us doing, it's not crazy. It's just what we're doing. But it's news of the faith. We're doing this because of our faith, because of what we believe in Jesus Christ. And it's really cool. So I went there and I picked up a truckload of stuff, and it's 1 o'clock. I hadn't eaten yet that day. And I thought, oh, boy, I guess I'm kind of hungry. So it's probably 1:30 by then. And I thought, I was eating on the way home because anytime, I can, I eat. And so I stopped by, and there's a waitress, and, it was a little after the rush, and she's like, hey, what are you doing? You on break or something? Like it's kind of late. I said, oh, I don't know. I just went and picked up some homeless stuff. It just naturally came out. It wasn't like, well, I was doing homeless ministry. It just kind of came out. I was like, wow, we picked up a load of stuff. She's like, really? Tell me more. And started telling about the stuff we're doing. She goes, that's really great. She come back a little later and asked me more. Tell me more about this, more of that. And I was like, oh yeah, this is what the people do. Blah blah blah. They bring food. These guys just got us some clothing and some blankets and all this stuff. And pretty soon she's sitting down at the table and we're having this conversation. And she goes, do you have a card? I'd love to do that. Well, come with us. You can come anytime. We go every 2 weeks. We're going this Saturday. And, well, she had to work. But she should hopefully make it sometime. Then somehow, I don't even know how we got there. We're talking about Africa. I'd love to go to Africa. So, well, I'm going next July. Come with us. She goes, oh, man, that'd be so great. I mean, all this and one of these days she's going to show up here at church, not because I said, well, here's our 4 or 5 year plan for whatever. It's because of the news of the faith of y'all. I mean, it's our faith in action, doing things, doing the gospel things, and that's contagious. People want to be a part of that. They don't want to know what are your core values. I wish people wanted to know more things like that. What is your key doctrines? They just want to know, what are you doing for Jesus? And they want to jump on board and be a part of that. And so it's easy for me to share the news of the faith, of the brethren, of Pathway too. It just kind of happens naturally. I think that's what's going on with Paul. He just comes out because he hears what's going on. He says, oh, they're doing this, and God's doing this through them, and these great things are happening, and it's really great. I can see Paul doing that. He writes it down in his letter, so obviously he did it just in his normal day-to-day life as well. It was inspiring Christians into action through what other Christians are doing because of their faith. The church in Rome is so vibrant. He's heard so many good things about it. Even Paul's like, man, I just want to go to Rome and see the church. He wasn't wanting to go see the ruins, which weren't ruins yet. he just wanted to go to Rome because he wanted there's the church is doing some good stuff there. Man, to be able to sit in front of the people there and do some teaching and do the gospel and talk about Jesus, that'd be so wonderful. That's one of his goals, which is number 3. He desires to visit the church. He tells him, I keep praying, I keep asking God, can we go to Rome? Can I go to Rome? I want to visit there. Which is kind of a lesson of be careful what you pray for. Because Paul prayed to go to Rome, and he finally was able to go there eventually as a prisoner. So it wasn't really necessarily what he was looking for, but he got to do everything he wanted to do as a prisoner. He stayed in prison for some 2 years. That's where he wrote Ephesians and Colossians and Philippians, Philemon, the prison epistles. It also enabled him to share the gospel with his guards who were right there with him, and it was trickled to other places. He got to talk to high government officials. He got to do a lot of things for the gospel because God brought him to Rome. Just wasn't exactly the way he had hoped he'd gone there. Now, his death is a mystery. We don't know all the facts. It's assumed he died in Rome as a martyr, maybe even when Nero ordered his execution after the big fire that happened in 64 AD. Some people think that might have been when he died. We don't know for sure, but it appears he died there. But this goes back to Paul being a bondservant. It wasn't his life. It wasn't his life goals. It wasn't his plan. Nothing mattered. He just said, okay, God, I'd love to go there, but you do what you want to do. You do you, God, and I'll do whatever you say. And it worked out. And he was okay with whatever happened. He was totally fine with that. At one point in Scripture, he says, to live is Christ, to die is gain. I really can't choose. I don't know what to do. I'll let you worry about that, God. I'm just going to keep preaching the gospel. That's all that matters. That's the kind of guy that Paul was. He is not a man of casual faith. He's not a man who has a list of 20 things to do and he's trying to decide, well, which one am I going to do? I can't do it all. What do I do? Let's put the church stuff down there. That's kind of boring. I'm going to do the fun stuff first. That wasn't him. You know, he was completely opposite of that. He put all the God stuff at the top. I'm going to preach. I want to teach. I want to share what's going on with Jesus Christ throughout anywhere I can go. He put everything of the faith first. The gathering with the saints was first. The pausing to pray for the people around him and their needs in the other churches was first. The preaching, the teaching, the sharing of the gospel wherever he went, that was first. Those were the things at the top of his list. Everything else was at the bottom. So what creates that kind of commitment? Paul wasn't always like that. I mean, he was very faithful to his faith, but it wasn't Christianity. It was Judaism. I mean, he was the best of the best there, too. So he went all the way there. But he was very opposed to Christianity. What happened in his life that made him suddenly, like his whole world flipped upside down? He was an aggressor against the church. He was knocking on doors and pulling Christians out of their homes and having them put to death or put in prison or having their property seized or whatever because he was so against the church, so against Jesus Christ. Something happened that completely flipped him upside down. He tells us in verse 16 and 17. So I want you to know, headed into Romans, as we're writing this big letter, everything that's coming, I want you to know I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God for the salvation to everyone who believes, first for the Jew, also for the Greek. For in it, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. It's the gospel. It's the gospel. That's what creates this kind of commitment to Paul. For Paul, the gospel is the power of salvation, he says. The Greek word there is dunamin, where we get words like dynamite. What's dynamite? It's explosive, right? It's not like oh yeah, he kind of believes in God. It's an explosive power, dunamin. Someone mentioned between services, yeah, you might even think of like dynamo. It's a sustained like energy that just never stops. Yeah, I was like, yeah, that defines Paul. There was something happened in the gospel as he heard the gospel, and his life turned upside down in a moment. Everything changed in one weekend as he was going to Damascus, literally to kill Christians, and everything flipped upside down when the gospel exploded in his life. It is a powerful thing. Paul uses this word intentionally because he felt that power. The gospel had the explosive power to change his life. He knew that. He experienced that. And as he radically changed and experienced that explosive power of the gospel, he started taking that everywhere he went, from church to church, from community to community. It blew up his life ambitions. It blew up his life goals. It blew up his role as a Pharisee. It blew up any future that some believe he was on the track to maybe be a high priest, definitely in high areas of leadership in the Jewish community. It blew up everything he knew. Everything he knew about God was blown up. And then, like I said, he began traveling around the world, preaching the gospel, planting new churches, seeing that same power over and over displayed in the lives of people around him. The explosive power of the love of God, the grace of God, the hope of heaven, over and over and over again. He saw people's lives just blow up. She says, I just want you to know, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is the power of God, the salvation. He changes lives. We're going to talk about the gospel. And he goes on in Romans. The power. See, this great thing about the gospel is I don't care how many things you've done in your life and what you've done in your past, the gospel can save you from it. There's nothing in your past that the gospel can't change. I don't care what you did last night. The gospel has the power to save you from it. It doesn't matter how far you have run from God. There's something about the gospel that has the ability to outrun you and find you and bring you home. It doesn't matter how hard your heart has become toward God. The gospel will break your heart, bring you to your knees, and save you. It'll do that. It doesn't matter how cold your heart has become toward God. The gospel will melt right through those layers of your cold stone cold heart and bring you back into his family. That's what happens with the gospel. It doesn't matter how far you've fallen away. The gospel will pull you out of the gutter, put you up on your feet, and declare you are a saint of God, loved by God, a saint. That's pretty cool. When the gospel grabs a hold of a person, it grabs every ounce of their body and their soul and their mind, because it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. Everyone. Even you. Even me. And if you've not yet allowed Jesus to radically blow up everything in your life, get ready for a wild ride, because you're going to see all kinds of reasons to let him do it in these next few weeks as we study through Romans. He will change you. He will flip you upside down and save you and give you an eternity. That's pretty cool. Let's pray.